At the turn of the 20th century, America was a land of limitless possibility. The skyline rose with steel and ambition, bold, daring, and unstoppable. Fueled by the American dream, small-town entrepreneurs built companies that reshaped industries and uplifted their communities. Innovation became the heartbeat of our nation. In 1912, local business leaders united with a shared purpose: to create a single voice dedicated to defending free enterprise, empowering businesses to serve people, provide solutions, and strengthen society. That voice became the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, committed to advancing economic freedom and opportunity for every American. For over a century, we've been a driving force at the crossroads of progress, shattering barriers, fueling growth, and creating opportunities for people building better lives. We don't just support business, we ignite it. From local startups to global enterprises, we create an environment where potential thrives, empowering communities, leaders, and creators to transform bold ideas into lasting impact. Working with and for a local, national, and global federation of partners, we fight for American businesses in the courts, in state capitals, in Washington, and on the world stage. Steadfast in our principles, unwavering in our resolve, uncompromising in doing what's right. This is America's story, written with vision, bound by conviction, illustrated through courage, and enriched by the hard work of everyday people, local business owners, and global visionaries who continue to define us. It's an enduring legacy of strength, determination, and shared ambition. One we proudly build upon as we work to write the next chapter of our nation's story. Join us. Together, let's build a future of growth and opportunity for the pursuit.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Free Enterprise Exchange. Defending, protecting, and advancing free enterprise is the U.S. Chamber's 114-year mission. That's why we created this platform to address common myths, explore emerging trends, and provide timely insights that will help us all understand and promote the values of the free enterprise system. Today, we'll explore how these principles of innovation, civic responsibility, and growth can help drive America's renewal and restore confidence in our nation's future. We're honored to be joined by Senator James Lankford and Neil Bradley, the Chamber's Chief Policy Officer, for a conversation inspired by the Senator's book, Turnaround: America's Renewal. Together, they'll examine how the entrepreneurial spirit that built our economy can transcend politics, empower communities, and reignite belief in the American dream. Senator Lankford has represented Oklahoma in the U.S. Senate since 2014, earning respect across party lines for his thoughtful approach to the nation's most pressing challenges. He's widely recognized for his leadership in promoting fiscal discipline and accountability in government, and for working to reduce excessive regulation that hinder business growth and economic strength. He serves on several key committees, including Finance, Homeland Security, Ethics, and Intelligence, where he focuses on policies that impact energy, infrastructure, and others. Before his time in Congress, Senator Lankford spent years serving students and families through leadership roles in youth programs. If you're joining us live and you're interested in posing a question to either of our speakers, you'll find a link in the description box labeled Submit a Question. Just click that and share your thoughts with us. We'll hear from Neil and the Senator first, then we'll kick it to audience questions. Thank you for being a part of this important conversation. And with that, I'll hand things over to Neil.
Well, thank you, Eric. Let me just say what a real honor this is for me to welcome Senator Lankford to our Free Enterprise Exchange. It would be enough of an honor just because he's my home state senator, but it's more than that. Even if he represented another state, I can honestly tell you that you will not find a better person, a more authentic person, a person who is oriented to doing right by their constituents and by this country than Senator Langford. And I've been inspired to know him and to learn from him since he joined the House of Representatives, even before the Senate. And knowing of the work that he did at Falls Creek back in our home state of Oklahoma, the impact that he has had on thousands of youth and families across our state and across our country really is unparalleled. And now he's taking all of that and he's written a book, Turnaround, America's Revival. So, Senator Langford, thanks for joining us today.
Neil, glad to do that. That's very kind. It's good to see you again.
It's great to see you. So I want to jump right in on the book. There's a lot in this, but it seems to me that one of the themes is this concept of anger versus problem solving, and that we're a nation that is too often consumed by anger, and we should be consumed by figuring out how we fix problems in our families, in our communities, and in our nation. Is that a fair kind of description of what you hope to accomplish and expose in this book?
No, that's a very fair description. I really run two threads through the book. One is anyone could be a leader. My challenge is that I hear is so many people say, that's a leader, or they've got a title, they've got a leader, and people with titles should be leaders no matter what your title may be on that role in your company or in government. But I want to inspire more people to step up and be a leader as well, and to encourage people to say leaders are very simple. If you see a problem and you work to solve it, you are leading. So it's notice the problem, then do something about it. That's a great employee to have, quite frankly, to inspire that. But it's also good for the country. Then the second step of that really is where you're diving in on it. And that is, hey, listen, we talk to all kinds of people. We got to figure out problems. That means you got to talk to people you disagree with. If you spend your whole life being the angriest person in your workplace or in your city or in your community, you may have a lot of people notice you, but you're not going to solve anything. The angriest person often makes enemies more than makes solutions. And so my focus is, how do we solve a problem? And it really comes from two things. One is culture focuses on the anger. And so we turn and look at it. You watch a football game this weekend, which I hope everybody gets to do. The sideline shot is not the person sitting on the bench quietly. It's the person throwing their helmet on the ground and screaming at their teammates. That's going to be the sideline shot every game because that's what people want to stop and look at. But the second aspect of it is, if you're going to solve a problem, gather people that are also committed to solving a problem and then go fix it, because people get angry because things are not fixed. So work to fix it, and it turns down the volume.
Yeah, you actually write that anger is the siren song of DC. It destroys, but it sells.
Yeah.
And I think everyone probably joining us today kind of looks at DC and looks at the people who are getting attention and says, yeah, that sounds about right. But too often we, at least in my opinion, we tend to think, well, that's a DC problem, right? We don't have that problem. But you also write, actually, at the very beginning of the book, that DC is actually a mirror of the nation.
Yeah.
Is that right? And is the anger that we see sometimes in our politics and our national politics a reflection, even more broadly, of what's happening in the country?
Yeah, we are a representative republic. That means what you see in DC is who we are. That reflects us. DC is the mirror to the country. If we don't like what we see, the issue is not the mirror. The issue is us on it. So we've got to be able to figure out, what do we do on that? And I actually nudge people. And it's interesting, we're talking about it right now. This book just came out not long ago, but one of the areas I nudge people, when people say DC is so divided, so angry, people can't seem to get along, I will often say to people, what was Thanksgiving like last year when all your family got together? Very often people will laugh and go, oh my gosh, my uncle and my cousin, they got off on politics and started yelling at each other, and we all left early. And I go, okay, well, welcome to DC. What we're seeing as families get together on Thanksgiving, when they get diverted off into politics and division, people get angry, they disagree on it, or they just don't show up and talk to each other anymore and say, it's just too angry. I don't even go anymore on that. That's where we are as a country. So my push is, if that's where we are as a country and we see that reflection in DC, how does that get better? Because I'm convinced Washington doesn't change the country changes Washington. And so really the question is, how does the country change? And it's family to family, community to community. It is the hard, long work. You don't just elect somebody and they turn the whole country around. The country shifts on its own, and then that is reflected in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, it's the old adage, politics is downstream from culture, right?
It is.
The culture that created and that informs the politics. In some ways, that's actually a message of hope, though, right? Because it actually means we control our own destiny, and what
It
we
is.
decide to do individually and collectively in our communities can actually change kind of the fate of the nation, which ought to be an inspiration, I think, for folks.
Well, I did write the book to actually be an encouragement and hopeful in that to be able to say to people, okay, there is a way to be able to turn this around because there are people throwing up their hands and saying it's too far gone, it's too angry, we're too divided, and I smile at them and I go, no, we've been angry, we've been more divided before in the past, we've had challenges before in the past. We are Americans. What we do is solve problems. This happens to be one of the problems we're solving. We solve problems at work, we solve problems in our families, in our communities. We solve problems in our nation. If we see things are going the wrong direction, we find a way to be able to praise what is good and to be able to bless what is good, and then say, let's do more of that rather than more of what's bad and evil.
I want to pull on a couple of the strings you just mentioned, but before we do, I want to spend one more moment on anger, because I think a lot of people look at things going wrong in our country or in their community, and they say, "But I should be angry about it, right? It's wrong, and something needs to happen, and we shouldn't just kind of lay back and go, we're just going to accept
That's
this."
right.
You write a little bit of you write about the difference between anger and righteous anger. And a lot of people we encounter kind of act with this sense that their anger is righteous, and is really kind of justifying kind of any type of action. Um, but you also say, spoiler alert, your anger probably isn't
Isn't.
righteous. What do you mean by that? And do you agree or disagree that we actually should be angry about some of the problems that we face?
Yeah, there's plenty of things to be angry about. There's $38 trillion in debt. There's division. There's lockup in Washington, D.C. There's disagreements on different policy issues. There are all kinds of issues on tariffs, and people feel like I don't have control of things anymore, and I can't actually plan my own company, and all the different things that are happening. And people go, hey, I'm frustrated. I'm angry. This has got to get better on it. When you're frustrated on an issue, you work on solving the problem. I try to tell people the folks on the other side of the TV can't hear you yelling at them. That doesn't actually solve the problem. Just yelling at the TV doesn't solve it. So you have to figure out, okay, that's what I'm upset about. How do I actually work to fix it? And yes, some problems are hard. They're more than just a phone call or an email or griping with a friend at a coffee shop. That doesn't fix it. So my goal with it is when you're angry on something, find a way to be able to solve that problem on it. Because what I find most often is people that are working on solving problems don't live in anger. People that are just sitting back angry that are not working to solve the problem just get angry and angry and angrier. And I go, okay, you're just spiraling. We need your energy to help solve that rather than just being angry. And on a DC level, I break it into three levels. There are the folks that want to do nothing, there are the folks that want to do something, and the folks that want to do everything. What's interesting is the folks that want to do everything and the folks that want to do nothing usually get the same result, nothing. Because we're not going to in DC do everything. But there are folks saying, I'm so angry. If we don't get everything, I'm going to do nothing. Well, okay, we're going to do nothing over and over. Well, let's do something to make the situation better. That's in a bill, that's in a company, that's in a family. To say, if there's a problem, let's do something. Let's take the first step to actually make the situation better. And you'll find you're becoming less angry because you're becoming more productive.
Yeah, we have a tendency to make the perfect the enemy of the good.
Yep.
Um, you draw on your prior career as a youth a Southern Baptist youth leader,
Right.
and you weave in a lot of lessons from Scripture. And one of the ones that you talk about is maybe one of the preeminent problem solvers, Nehemiah.
Yep.
Share a little bit about what you think is instructive about that story for us today.
Yeah, the book I draw from a lot of things from scripture, American history stories, current events, and things that are happening. But I do just, you're right. My default is I go back to scripture. That's a baseline foundational document for me to be able to look at scripture and go, what are the lessons learned? What are the direction and who we are? And Nehemiah is one of my favorite stories in scripture. If you're not familiar with the story is the Jews have been conquered by the Babylonians. They've lived in exile at this time 50, 60, 70 years. And Nehemiah is a slave living in a foreign land. And his brother Hanani, at the first chapter of the book, walks in and says he got to go to Jerusalem. And Nehemiah just says, "Oh, what's it like in Jerusalem right now?" And Hanani says, "Oh, it's awful. The people live in disgrace. The economy has collapsed there. The walls are down. They're defenseless. It's terrible." And Hanani just walks off. Well, Nehemiah drops to his knees and says, "God, this is terrible. What do I do about it?" And to me, it's a defining focus on leadership. You've got two people. One says stinks to be them and walks away. And the other one says, "God, what do I do about this?" And continues to pray until he figures out something that he can do. Nehemiah ends up leaving as a slave and he ends up going back to Jerusalem. He helps reestablish the economy, reestablish the walls and the defenses around the city in 2 months. What had been down for decades and decades and destroyed, he organizes the people and says, work on the section right next to your house. Work on this section. And if you work on that section and you work on that section, things will start to get better. It's a hopeful book in some ways to say if things are bad, it just takes someone noticing it and doing something about it and being able to say, okay, let's get started on this problem. Let's stop complaining about this problem. Let's get started. You do this part, you do this part, you do this part. And then when everybody's finished, you turn around and go, oh, wait, we actually got something done. So my challenge is I want to be able to challenge any person who reads the book, no matter what their title is, to be able to say, if you see a problem, don't just say stinks to be them and that's a terrible problem. Say, what can I do about this? And how can I encourage other people to be able to step in? I know it sounds cliche-ish, but we've seen it for millennia. People that notice the problem and do something about it solve the problems.
Yeah, and I mean, you tell stories about being with your daughters and picking up trash at the end of your road,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like you could gripe about it, or you could actually
Do
pick up
something
the
about it.
trash, and it turns out the old broken window theory that you clean up some of the small things that are falling apart in a neighborhood, and bigger things start getting better just by those small acts.
Yep.
I want to ask you this. You didn't say this in the book, but I'm wondering if you would agree with it. Um, One of the things that is going on is that there's a constant focus on negativity. We focus on what's wrong in our government, we in our politics, we focus on what's wrong with capitalism. And in some ways, it's not then surprising that people internalize that message, right? That, oh, well, maybe this whole 250 years of democracy, maybe that
Yeah.
wasn't exactly right. Maybe this free market, maybe it's not everything it's kind of cracked up to be. And maybe we shouldn't fault them if all they hear is negative messages. Is one of the things that people can do simply sharing positive, good news about things that are happening in their state capital or in their community? In the U.S. Congress, actually, good things do happen occasionally,
They do.
or in the free market. Is that part of the thing that each of us can do?
It is. Each of us can do that. And one of the sections of the book, I talk about the old economic principle that's there. If you tax something more, you get less of it. That's common. But also, if you criticize something more, you get less of it. I use an illustration. There are people that are complaining right now about education and teachers, and I hear this kind of buzz. I'm mad about teachers and everything else. But if you continue to be able to criticize teachers, you'll get fewer people that actually go into education. There'll be fewer kids that want to be able to grow up and say, I want to be a teacher because they just hear the criticism all the time. Well, that's actually a vicious circle that actually begins to take down our education system. So the question is, what can I do to be able to bless, to be able to find ways to be able to encourage the next generation of people? How can I encourage work? How can I bless people that actually notice a problem and take it on? What is it that we can do to be able to help recognize what's going good, and so we get more of it? People are drawn towards where there's positive on there. They're not drawn towards what's negative. They may be angry, and angry people like getting together and being angry together in their own angry choir. I've seen that. We talk about it some in the book on it, these angry choirs that are out there. But there are people that are really drawn to, where can I get blessed? Where can I get encouraged on it? When you encourage that in your workplace, in your communities, in your politics, in your nation, you will get more of it.
There is so much going well in our economy. There's so much going well in innovation and small businesses, and there's so much to celebrate about what we've done to lift billions
Yeah.
of people out of crushing global poverty over the last 40 years. We're coming up on Thanksgiving. Maybe Thanksgiving ought to be kind of more of a year-round approach,
It,
not just once a year.
Not a terrible idea.
So, you do, though, say that solving problems, and I think you're particularly talking about it through our political system often, has costs. And we just can't ignore the fact that that has costs. And you have had some firsthand experience about that. You stood up and said, in the last Congress, not this Congress, in the last Congress and the last administration, that we really have a problem with our southern border, and something has to be done about it. And we're going to have to bring Republicans and Democrats together to do it. And there was a pretty high cost for you, it seemed
Yep.
like, in stepping out on that. I'm curious if you can share a little bit about that, because one of our audience members actually asks, given those costs, are you hitting the pause button on trying to work on these issues going forward? Is that the lesson you took from it, or did you take a different lesson?
No, I took a very different lesson. Just because something's hard doesn't mean you stop working on it and you stop doing it. The things that we're working on in DC are hard problems. They're complicated issues, and you've got to be able to move large groups of people to begin to think the same way. That's hard to do. If I grabbed 100 people on this video conference right now and said we've got to pick the same restaurant to go to and the same thing on the menu to order when we all get there, it would take us a long time to agree to the exact same restaurant, the exact same thing on the menu to order. Well, welcome to the United States Senate. I've got to get 60 people to agree to the exact same thing at the exact same time to be able to do that. It's a very complicated thing to do, but we're sent here to be able to do hard things. And so we have to do that. A year and a half ago, when I was working on border security, we had 12,000 people a day that were illegally crossing our border. It was chaos. It was a moment that I was pushing to say, we have to do something. We can't just sit back and say, this is terrible and scream about it. We've got to find a way to be able to bring folks together that don't want to talk, and to be able to find a way to be able to change this. What's interesting is the bill itself obviously failed. It was a large, epic fireball politically to be able to go down and be in the middle of. So I get that. And there's all kinds of issues, and I actually write about it in the book. What's funny was I didn't plan to write about this at all, Neil. But my wife actually said to me, no, everybody's going to pick up your book and they're going to expect a chapter on that, because people watched what you went through on that. They're going to expect it. So I told her for about a month I wasn't going to write it. And she told me for about a month, yes, you are. And it ended up being actually the longest chapter in the book. But it was not only lessons learned, but it's the experience of walking through something hard, and to say, we got to keep doing hard things. We got to get back on and to be able to keep working on the hard things. What's interesting on that bill, the bill ended up failing, but the Biden administration ended up implementing some of the policies on their own that they could do that. Actually, if you watch the immigration numbers from when we started on that bill and we exposed the issues at 12,000 people a day that were illegally crossing a border, within about 8 months, they implemented some of the policies they could do on their own, but just had refused to do in the past. We were down to 2,000 and 3,000 people a day illegally crossing a border, which is way too high still. But we had dropped 8,000 or 9,000 people a day just by implementing some of those policies behind the scenes. So we did make a difference. We did shift the narrative internally in Washington, D.C., and in the Biden administration. They did start to accelerate some of their enforcement actions, but we still have a ways to go. There's still law that has to be done in that area. And so, yes, I continue to be able to work on it, so that no matter who's president, no matter what's going on, we need to have a fair, good immigration system that benefits all Americans. And that, quite frankly, we continue to be able to recognize there are people around the world that we do want to come here to be able to work. We just have to find a legal process that actually works for everyone to do it.
Well, your amen, I think, is what people just said to your last point, especially about ways for people to legally come here. In fact, I was just about to ask you a question on that because one of our small business owner audience members was talking about the difficulty that they're still having in their community finding workers. And so the work that you're doing on that, that your colleagues are doing on, I think is really important and moving this ball forward, even if we don't get a bill in the next 6 months. We would like to, but to your point, just pushing these ideas can help change the debate. One of the reasons it was a fireball on the bill was there was a lot of misinformation.
Yep.
And the old adage that a lie has made its way around the globe while the truth is still lacing up its shoes
Yep.
seems especially apt in the era of social media and kind of technology. And one of the folks joining us today actually asks about how we can preserve civility and do the work that you're talking about with this kind of technology and social media and misinformation that's out there. And they go on to say, I think they're pointing to all the problems here, balance that out with the need for innovation. So you don't really talk a lot about kind of the technology aspect of this in your book, but I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, there's a section where I talk about during the immigration debate what happened on social media, and you are correct on the quote there that the lie does get halfway around the world before the truth gets its boots on. The challenge that we have is we can't believe everything we read. We know that, and I quote in the book my favorite Abraham Lincoln quote is when Abraham Lincoln once said, "You can't believe everything you read on the internet." So for me, it is this very simple thing of saying things that we see out there that are quotes from people or things that people quote unquote said are now in the land of AI that we're living in, videos that we see and audio that we hear. We want to believe that because we want to trust other people on it, but we also understand that's fake. That's been created. That's something that's been spun, sometimes by, quite frankly, by another nation state, like Russia and others that love just spinning all this crazy stuff into it. Sometimes by somebody that's in their basement just creating stuff because they're just venomous and they want to just create things. Some of it's also with political parties. That literally there is a political operation to try to be able to destroy people. We see the same thing in companies. Companies deal with this all the time. What is the Yelp review? What are the different? How many stars do you get? What does that actually look like for people? And people are trying to figure out how do I manage someone that's just an angry person that is going online and saying things that are completely false. So you got to get the truth out. You got to be aggressive to be able to do that. I learned that full well as we walked through the bill. There was a section of the bill that we call the belt and suspenders part of the bill. That if there were 5,000, actually it was 4 to 5,000 people that are crossing the border in a day, you could shut the border down entirely and have to put a month-long hold on it and to say no one's crossing at all, no one's getting processed for asylum, no one, because we're being overrun at this point. But social media took that and said, actually, it allows 5,000 people a day, every day, to be able to cross illegally before we do anything. Well, that was totally false. But because they could take a little grain of truth in it and take the number 5,000 that was in the bill and spin it to something else, those that didn't want to do anything on immigration and to be able to actually prohibit us from actually doing anything, use that lie to be able to spin it. So we as a country are still learning how to be able to do this. As long as we've had social media, we're still figuring it out and how to believe one thing and not believe something else and to be able to check our facts. But it is our responsibility as companies and as leaders to be able to make sure the truth is getting out as rapidly as we can and that we confront lies that are sitting out there. You can't allow them to be able to sit there.
Yeah, and as individuals, right, we have an obligation not just to believe everything we read, but also not to repeat everything that we hear if we're not certain that it's
It's
valid.
true. Yep.
I think there's a huge personal responsibility there. You talked about the need of kind of bringing 60 votes together in the Senate, and you write about the Senate in the book, and you say it's the place where we collide, meaning kind of the collective we of the American people. There's a lot of folks who say, man, 60, that's a big number. How about we just make it easier and we
Mhm.
decide to do things with 51 votes?
Yep.
And this is the debate that's going on about removing the cloture requirement or the filibuster. From your perspective, how do you think about balancing out the need to make progress and solve problems with this thing that makes it a little bit harder to pass legislation? Um, how should we balance that scale?
Yeah, since the 1800s, about 1804, actually, we've had some kind of focus on how do you, as the Senate, actually operate with this body that was recognized that anyone could stand and speak, anyone could take the leadership on it at any time, and could make sure their voice is being heard. The House is a simple majority body. If you got a majority, you can move as fast as you want, do whatever you want. The courts are a majority body. You get to the Supreme Court, you got five, then you actually pass it. In the executive branch, obviously, it's one that leads all of it. The only place we have in all of government where both sides have to be heard is the United States Senate. And yes, it slows things down, but it forces us as a country to have one place where both sides have to be heard. What's the benefit of that is we don't have laws that just switch back and forth dramatically. It gives us some consistency. It's why we all get so frustrated in business with regulations that seem to change with every president. The law is supposed to be consistent. And if we're going to change it, both sides have to be heard and agree on it and to be able to move. And that place is the Senate. So while the House is built for speed, the Senate is built for dialogue. And I think that is very important to be able to maintain that as a country. And I've been very outspoken. There's a section of the book even talking about the importance of the cloture rule, the filibuster rules, to say, yes, it's a good thing, actually. It's frustrating when you're in the majority. It is encouraging when you're in the minority that I can't just be run over. Both sides have to be heard. And we've got to, like grown-ups, sit down and talk to somebody we disagree with and figure out how to be able to solve the problem. So whether it's this crazy long shutdown that we just went through, that was absurd to actually go through all that in the drama, and people were saying, just in the filibuster and do whatever you want. I think, okay, the long-term consequences for the country are not good for business. It's not good for our basic operation and consistency if we just throw the filibuster out the window and say we're going to switch back and forth at a whim of every election. Let's continue to be able to talk and be the adults.
Yeah, your point about durability is one we talk about at the U.S. Chamber a lot. Like you can't make 2-year or 4-year plans in business. You're making investments for 5, 10, 15,
Yeah.
40 years. And if the rules are changing constantly, because we do seem to be turning over who's in charge every couple of years, this guardrail to guardrail, it makes it really hard to build and grow a company. I think the other thing it does too, and people don't like to admit this, but sometimes our own ideas are actually improved when they're refined by others.
Yeah.
And my experience has been sometimes we actually get better laws the more people who have to be involved in the process because there's just things that we don't think about or unintended consequences. So your effort at building consensus, I suspect, tends to end up making better law.
Well, I hope that it does. I'm a conservative. I'm unashamedly so. That's the perspective I come from, and that's the perspective my state actually represents. And I have the opportunity to be able to share that perspective. But I'm shocked that there's not everyone in the country thinks exactly like Oklahomans. They should. Clearly, everyone should think like us,
Absolutely.
but not everyone does. And so, if we're going to operate as a nation, we've got to actually have hard conversations to be able to work it out.
So I want to go to one of our audience questions, and I'm going to read it here because I think it gets to the heart of one of the things that you hope to encourage in people. This individual asks, as a small business owner contracting with the federal government, I'm always thinking about how to balance profitability with civic impact. In turnaround, you emphasize renewal through free enterprise. What practical steps can small business owners take right now to grow in ways that not only strengthen their communities, but also contribute to America's long-term revival? How
Yeah.
do I be
So,
both a business owner and a
yeah.
civic contributor?
Yeah, I think it's a great way to be able to do that. So there's a couple of things. One is I encourage businesses to have a model that is focused on free enterprise. There's some businesses that are focused all on federal contracting. If they want to be a federal contractor, we need to have more folks on that. But if your focus is how do I get federal dollars and you're not focused on how we're serving the public in different ways in the free enterprise system, you're vulnerable to what happens in federal contracting at any point. So that's a vulnerability issue to be able to deal with. So getting involved as a community is as simple as how are you involved in supporting local nonprofits in the area? What are you doing to be able to actually engage in solving problems? How can the community use your business to be able to actually benefit the entire community? I'm a big believer in the free enterprise system. I talk about it in the book, and to say capitalism does work. Just like our Constitution does work, but the more that government interferes with business, the slower business becomes, and we start to lose the genius of capitalism, of the competition and of the innovation that's actually forced. So keeping government out of the business actually helps us run better as a country. And so for me, I try to use this book as a teaching element for that as well, to try to help people that don't understand the free enterprise system and capitalism and how our republic actually works, to be able to use that as a teaching element for them. But as far as civic engagement, what are you doing to be able to help your school? I use that example in the book as well. Lots of folks complain about the school down the street and say, gosh, I'm not sure how the education is going or what they need. Well, great. I encourage small businesses to adopt a classroom, not just a school, adopt a classroom and a teacher. And some of your employees can go and volunteer and to be able to read to kids in that classroom, to go help the teacher, to go get supplies for that teacher. But it's if you're worried about where the school is going down the street, you can either complain about it, or your small business can actually engage and say, what am I going to do to be able to help? Now, it may not be the school, it may be something else. But again, going back to this Nehemiah principle, you can either say, that's terrible and walk past it, or you can say, God, why is that on my heart? Why am I so upset about that? What can I do to actually help make that situation better? That's where a business connects to a community, and a business and the individuals in that business start not only making money and supporting their families and helping those families and their community with their product, but they also help the community in very practical ways, in ways that the community needs.
Yeah, and yeah, it turns out there's lots of ways to do that. I'll just mention for the benefit of our audience, at the U.S. Chamber, we've launched a partnership with the College Board. They're the ones that have AP classes in high school. For the first time ever, they've actually created an AP class that's not just for kids going on the college track. It's an AP class for kids whether they're going to college or straight into the workforce, and it's on business principles and personal finance. So if you care about free enterprise, it's telling your local school, hey, it'd be great to have this course offered, and even going a step farther and saying, you know what, a kid who took the initiative to study business principles and personal finance in high school, I'm going to make sure they get an interview in my company when they
Yep.
apply, is a real simple thing that we can do to send market signals that actually improve our educational system. So it doesn't have to be that complicated sometimes.
Nope. It doesn't. It's just the engagement. Notice the problem, actually do something about it rather than complain about it. The most basic of all elements of leadership.
Yeah. Well, I know we're beginning to run tight on time, but I want to end uh, on a point that you mentioned in your book, and we're coming up on Thanksgiving, and it actually reminded me of one of my personal favorite Thanksgiving traditions. Every Thanksgiving morning, I like to read the Wall Street Journal's editorials that they've printed ever since the 1960s about America, from the beginning of the Pilgrims coming over to today.
Yep.
And one of the lines that always gets me is when they say, America, though many know it not, is one of the great underdeveloped countries of the world. What it reaches for exceeds by far what it's grasped. You write something similar in your book. You say, we are Americans. We are never content where we are. There's always something else to be done. Tell us a little bit more about that and what that means to you.
Yeah, it's the core of who we are. And we're at our best when we're actually solving problems. We're at our worst when we're complaining about problems. So we as Americans are never content with where things are. It's just the nature of who we are. And it's what the rest of the world stares at Americans, and they can't figure us out in many ways. And I think one of those critical issues is we don't just sit back and go, okay, we're there. We go, what is still undone? Where have we not been? What have we not done? What innovation is still yet to be done? How can we improve this system? How can we be faster and more efficient? What does it take to do that? Because while some parts of the world sit back and go, that's hard, we look at it and go, yeah, that's hard. Let's try it. when we lose that American energetic spirit of saying, this is hard, let's try to fix that, let's try to solve that, we lose some core of who we are. So for me, it is when it's difficult, when it's hard, when it's challenging, we get up earlier, we work harder, we engage, we find people and we train them. And we say, how can we actually bring people on board and to be able to give them that hope and optimism that we have? Because in our core, we're still Americans. I'm amazed at the number of people that say, I can't find anybody to work. I totally get that. And I talk to people about it all the time on it and say, so we're an American. This is a hard problem, challenging. Who are you training? Who you're reaching out to? You talk about the college board and trying to be able to get folks in high school. I talk to more and more people that are recruiting people in high school or in early college, very earliest years, and saying, I want to help train you and equip you. Yes, it's a hard issue. We've hit a hard moment as a nation on that. So great. It's the next challenge for us. Let's raise people up and let's see what we can actually do generationally to shift this. We're Americans. We solve problems. So let's go at the next problem. Let's go solve it.
Yeah, it turns out when we look at a problem and we decide to stop griping and start solving, it actually feels pretty good, and it's pretty consistent with who we are as a nation. Senator, I can't thank you enough for spending time with us this morning, for sharing the insights from your book. I will commend folks can order online Senator James Lankford's new book. I think you'll be inspired, as I was when you read it. And Senator, we can't thank you enough for sharing those thoughts and insights, but in particular for sharing your service with our great nation. Thanks for joining us today.
You bet, Neil. Thanks very much on it.